Hey everyone, welcome back to Breakthrough Innovation, where we uncover what it really takes to lead change, create value, and build what's next. I'm JL Heather. Preston couldn't make it today, but together we lead Centered, a firm that helps organizations navigate complexity, spark creativity, and unlock the full potential of their teams through innovation coaching and strategy. Today's guest is someone who bet on himself early, which is usually a good bet. He put in his 2 weeks' notice on the first day of training at a big four accounting firm to start his own company. Coby Skonord is the founder of IdeaWake, an innovation management platform used by companies like Kraft Heinz, SiriusXM, US Bank, and Jason's Deli to crowdsource employee ideas that drive revenue, reduce costs, and improve efficiency. Over the past decades, he's worked with thousands of organizations to design bottom-up innovation programs, raised over 3.7 million in venture funding, and learned firsthand almost everything that you can do wrong on the journey from 0 to 2 million ARR. Well, hopefully, Kobe, you did a few things right there as well because you're still in business. But welcome to the show. We're really glad to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jay. I'll look forward to it.
Awesome. So I think there's really only one place we can start with this because I don't know many people who would start at one of the big four firms and put their 2 weeks notice in on day one. So I'm curious, what did you see that made you walk away? And what did that decision teach you about risk and innovation?
So great place to start, JL. And so, I mean, overall, like, did a 5-year program for accounting and finance originally. And although it wasn't, I call myself a reformed accountant. It wasn't that I didn't dislike accounting. It was more, I was young, had this idea that I was very passionate about. And it was in the early days when Kickstarter was, crowdsourcing in general, and
Right.
crowdfunding was starting to become like really mainstream. And so I figured if I didn't take the leap now, I would always wonder what if. And I figured I was young enough if I failed, I could end up going back to a
Yeah.
big four. Whether that was true or false, we'll never know. But basically put in the 2 weeks, first day of training, never looked back. But overall, it was just really the question of what if, and then also, having some great support from family that helped, fund me for 2 months for
Hmm.
rent while I was getting up and running.
That's a really
So
great question, though. What if? I think that's something we need to train ourselves to ask more often.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right?
Yeah. So, you walked away, based on that question, what if? Like, as you went down that journey, what did you learn? So, like, you mentioned that you made all the mistakes, on your way to 2 million ARR. Like, what were some of those lessons that you learned? What can you share?
Well, we don't have a full hour here, so
Yeah.
I'll try to give some of the highlights. The overall, the first iteration of the product, right? Lesson one was, just because you build it, people won't come. And so, like with what we do today, I'm sure with a lot of the coaching that you do, right, around like lean startup best practices and design thinking methodology, none of that was there at the time. I was just a 23-year-old that had recently graduated college with like little to no money. And so I was super passionate though about this idea of being able to crowdsource the entire product development process. So didn't have a good idea of business model. We just started building the product. And the entire issue is that the market that we were going at, we tried to build this whole thing out and did build the whole thing out, the platform. Got users, got usage. The problem was the business model. Well, first iteration was our market inventors didn't feel comfortable sharing their ideas because of IP,
Mm.
right? So we did a
Yeah.
market pivot after the first like 6 to 8 months and started targeting entrepreneurs. The big assumption there that we needed to validate before we built out the whole thing, which is what you would do now in retrospect, after all the learnings, is basically entrepreneurs don't have money. Not a good thing to base the business model off of a lot of the
Not
time.
all of them, at least.
Yes, yeah, not all of them. Yes, and so when we were like, it was the idea was a volume, like small transaction, high volume,
Right.
but for the business model itself. But then what we ended up doing was pivoting to enterprise off of the speech that I was giving on crowdsourcing at like a local organization was called Bid Starts at the time event, and that's ended up how we got our first customer. And
And that's
so
the hardest one to get.
exactly, precisely. And so, biggest lessons would be like do market validation and understand the customer before you start building something. And another one would be don't work with your friends.
Mm.
And I'm still close now with one of my original co-founders, but from a business perspective, didn't end up making sense. So I'm very. You talk to 10 people, they'll give you 10 different. Well, really two different answers. Folks are either like, yes, you can work with friends and family, and others are no. I'm strong in the camp of no,
Yeah.
just based off experience. And then just to give one more for the rule of threes here, I would say, um, in terms of fundraising itself, for anybody that is doing fundraising, like I mean, 3.7 in the Midwest is a decent chunk of change,
Yeah.
but like it's nothing like Silicon Valley. But from my experience, right, we did it across like a couple different rounds, and I would say full boat philosophy is really interesting. So basically, it takes you a like the first customer principle. It takes you 95% of the time to get the first commitment and funding, even if it's not a lead investor on the round. But what ends up happening is if you talk to 50 people, you get 49 no's and you get your first yes, normally from circling back to a person two or three times. And so the investor that said no to us 5 times now sits on our board as our lead. As soon as that first investor comes in, though, in the round, the whole
Yeah.
thing is filled early within
Oh
72
yeah.
hours.
It's like
So
dating, right? It seems like no one's
it
interested
really
until you're
it is.
dating someone, and then it just
Yep.
all happens.
Hmm.
No, I love that, and I think those are great lessons. I mean, there's a lot to be said in there that really resonates with design thinking principles and things like that you see today. Maybe to dig in a little bit more on kind of what you're doing, your product. We hear so many companies talk about like, hey, they need the ideas. So
Hmm.
it's a little bit of that quantity idea, but so few of them that actually take them in. I want to think how I say this. I don't want to say that they don't capture meaningful ROI from them. They may, but they don't, at the very least, they don't measure it. And I'm guessing they probably don't actually get it either. So I'm curious, what is the biggest reason that those bottom up innovation programs are failing?
So a lot of it comes down to if organizations say that they want ideas, but then there's no like change management process involved. Most companies when they reach out to us, right, and or like we're in the like dating phase where they're considering working with us, it's they want to build an innovation culture inside the organization. So it's this is a kind of a subset overall on innovation ROI. Like for what we do, it's bottom up, right? So it's
Right.
going to all frontline staff, capturing ideas that might be small or big. We like the smaller ones better because they're easier to implement and measure.
Right.
But one of the mistakes is companies try to implement a program in order to they won't fund they'll expect to build the next iPhone, but give allocate one FTE and like a couple $1,000 in
The
budget to
zombie
it,
funding, right? Like you
right?
fund it just enough to keep moving, but not enough to actually be alive.
Yep, exactly. And so, and by the way, to build the next iPhone, you need like 25% of the operating budget of the company to do. So like you're expected to deliver on something as one FTE that has goals that don't align with the organization. That's because these are like multiple things, but overall, it's not aligning the expectations of the outputs of the program with what you're actually like setting up for the inputs, right? So what we find works best normally is doing the quick wins. So starting small, even if you want to get big, and building innovation as a muscle. Really, it's the muscle of demonstrating ROI, building out a pipeline to actually manage change for ideas that are coming in. Because the
Yeah.
thing is, IT is already allocated 120% for the year already before the year starts. And so it's baking that in and figuring out the change management for small things, building the justification to get more resourcing over time. And then you get a larger impact off of like nobody that we've worked with has built the next iPhone. But larger things like disrupt what you would classify as like H2 or disruptive type
Right.
innovation, right? It's starting with like H1 and just quick wins and simple fixes, and then expanding out from there. And a lot of companies try to start with the end in mind and just jump straight to the end, but don't resource it
Yeah.
effectively.
Well, and it's
Uh,
like hearing you talk about those structural issues. It is interesting to think like so many organizations feel like it is the field of dreams. If you put it out there, it'll just work. Like they'll come, it'll just happen. I wonder, like, it feels like there's like these structural blockers, like can'ts, there's these political ones, there's these financial ones, like there's all these different things that organizations have to be considering just to get the ball rolling. What I'm curious, like, and we didn't really get to is like the ROI part of that. How should
yep.
they be measuring the ROI? Because I think if they could measure the ROI, they would maybe funding and other things would start, they'd have a clear definition of success that they could use to justify action. So how do you help
Mhm.
them measure that ROI?
Yeah, so I'm gonna try to succinctly answer this, but we have like a whole system that we've set up because we've seen this so many times in terms of the
Yeah.
failure over the years. And so basically, what you would do up front is measure. for bottom up specifically, right, where you want to build the culture of innovation, the initial metrics, you would focus on overall participation rate of frontline staff and like volume metrics, like quantity of ideas coming in
Yeah.
and projected value. You always want to have some type of subject matter expert going in and doing some type of projection on the value of the ideas, even if you're only going to implement 5% of them, right? Then that would be like your months 0 through 6. You use that 0 through 6, like the initial launches, we call them enabling events in order to
Right.
unlock additional resourcing. So upfront, how you measure the ROI, right, from 0 to 6 is going to be like how many folks that you get activated and engaged and projected value from submissions. The app from 6 to 12, you focus on, right, not the next iPhone, but quick win ideas. And then you start to look at, hey, what is the implemented financial value? Not actually measured yet because it hasn't been implemented. Some of this stuff takes 6 months to a year before you can actually measure dollars on like savings, right?
Right.
Even if it's like a soft savings. But then it would be right at the end of year one or 6 months to year one. How much of the projected value did we implement, right? And what we found we can do, if organizations follow this path, you can get, if you don't have a program in place, a 2% operating margin improvement off of quick wins, like reducing errors. If you have to incorporate some soft savings in there too, but it's
Mhm.
like half of that, right? So a 1% operating margin improvement is like hard savings from error rate reduction, eliminating processes, redundant tasks, things like that.
Yeah.
Then after year one, going on and going forward, you have measured implemented value.
Yeah.
So over time, what is the program actually producing? But you always keep the other two things like they stack on top of each other.
Right.
So you always want to measure, hey, what's the engagement rate? That becomes less and less important over time as the program matures. But you always want to look at engagement rate of staff, the ROI projected in the pipeline, and then actual implemented value.
Yeah.
Does that cover
No,
it
I
all? I
like
think.
that. You said something early on that kind of triggered something for me. Like you may only do like 5% of them, of the ideas that you get. I'm curious. It sounds like a lot of what you're talking about is incremental internal improvement, not necessarily new product or updates to existing products. So one, that may be incorrect, and then two, and then maybe this is the better question. So maybe we'll focus on this one. If all you do is implement 5%, how do you keep people motivated to keep contributing?
Yep. So great question on that. Well, to answer part two first, to get folks to continue engaging, what we found, and we do our own primary research. So we did like last one we did was a survey of 700 employees throughout the continental U.S.
Mhm.
And we asked, like, it was all around attitudes of like how well employers listen. The
Yeah.
question that was the most interesting, which isn't rocket science, but uh, was, if you have ideas, why did you stop sharing them? And number one reason, it was 1 in 5 people, 21%, was driven by the fact that they had shared an idea previously and they hadn't received feedback. So the black hole conundrum,
Mm.
right? Like their idea fell into a black hole. The second one was their idea got implemented and they didn't receive recognition for it. So not in the top, and we had 15 different options that you could choose from, right? In terms of like the drivers of why folks who had ideas stopped sharing. Not, it literally was like 14 out of 15 was that their idea didn't get implemented. So
Huh.
folks care a lot less about whether the idea gets implemented. They care very much so about the transparency behind where their idea is going and why, how quick that feedback is, and whether they receive recognition if their idea does
I
get
love it.
implemented.
I mean, that's a very human thing, which is a big part of this.
Mhm.
So now, Kobe, we do have to start wrapping up. I'm curious for any CEOs listening today who want to unlock more value from employee ideas, what's the first move they should make other than
Yeah.
working with you?
Yeah. So I would say there's a overall, if you look at the tone at the top, and this is within accounting and auditing as well, tone at the top is key. And so the CEO driving and basically telling frontline staff that they want ideas and getting some type of program set up. You don't need to use something like IdeaWake up front. In order to build the initial case, you can use a Microsoft form. But
Mm.
the most important thing a CEO can do is set the expectation at all levels of the organization. And that's going to be from like your direct lieutenants of the expectation that they want every employee within their divisions that report up to them to share at least one idea within the next 12 months.
Mm.
So starting there and setting it's as simple as that, and then actually tracking that, by the way. So
Yeah.
overall, it's like setting the expectation and just starting simple. But then from there, when you actually, because you will, if you follow this process right through, you will start to see implemented value from the program. Just like where you want to end up at the end state is going to be having this baked into everybody's like 365 or annual quarterly reviews, however often you're doing performance reviews. That's when the culture is truly instilled, and that's what I would define culture as: is whether something is measured and put into the review structure of the organization for promotions or
I
bonuses.
couldn't agree more. If you don't measure it, if you don't make it part of the review, the part of the rewards, you won't get it. So I love it. Kobe, what's the best way for people interested in IdeaWake and working with you? What's the best way for them to get into contact?
Yeah, yeah. So if you want to learn more just about IdeaWake in general and what we do and who we work with, you can go to our website. That's IdeaWake, IDEAWAKE.com. And then you can book a demo, and or there's just a bunch of resources, information about justification for programs like these, success stories, failure stories as well, for those that want to figure out what not to do.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you can also reach out to me directly at Kobe at IdeaWake.com.
Awesome. Well, I love this idea that good ideas don't have to come from the top. I think Simon Sinek has this quote, a leader's job is not to have all the great ideas. A leader's job is to create the environment where great ideas can happen. And I think that's a lot of what I hear that Idea Wake does. So I wish you the best of luck in it. Thank you so much for all the insights, Kobe. For everyone else who made it with us to the end, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. What are some of the ideas you've had that didn't pan out? Why didn't you share again? Why aren't you sharing now? I think it'd be really interesting to hear. And then if you know someone who can benefit from learning a little bit more about IdeaWake and meeting Kobe, send them this episode. Share the wealth. We all benefit when you pass the knowledge around. And last but not least, thanks for joining. Thank you, Kobe, and we'll see you all next time on Breakthrough Innovation.
Thanks, Jay.